Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Pagan's Witchy Corner. My name is Pagan, and today I am rejoined by Madame Pamita. If you had listened to the previous episode, thank you. If you haven't, make sure you pause this one, go back and listen to the first one so that way everything makes sense because we are continuing our wonderful conversation about Baba Yaga and her beautiful book, and which is Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, and it's wonderful. So, Madame Pamita, welcome back to the show, and I am so glad we get to finally continue this wonderful conversation.
I know we needed to. I felt like we had so much more to talk about, and so I'm so glad we're doing this.
Oh my god, we had so much more to talk about, and like the first episode was brilliant in all of the ways that it can be, but we barely scratched the surface of what I really wanted us to cover and what Baba wanted us to cover, because she's the one who helped me inspire all the questions for the interview. So we have a lot more to talk about, so we're just gonna dive right on in, and let's talk about kind of how this works with Slavic and folk traditions are deeply tied in the land. And you did talk about this a little bit in the previous episode, but how can practitioners outside of Eastern Europe obviously respect the land and give it what it needs, but also still work with these traditions and honor where they came from?
Well, I think one of the lovely practices in Slavic magic is honoring Mother Earth. So there's lots of names that are given to Mother Earth. Moist Mother Earth is the translation, Matisiri Zemlia, and so you can. Earth is Earth. I mean, the land where you stand has those qualities. And what's unique about the beliefs um, of Ukrainians is that they don't see the land as like personified. It's actually the physical dirt
Mm-hmm.
that has this spirit. So it isn't a lot of spirits of a lot of locations. There's a lot of locational spirits in Slavic practices, and but there's one really special one, which is Mother Earth, and Mother Earth is the land where we stand. And so working with the earth and planting things. I mean, as simple as like gardening, even if you live in an apartment, having a little potted plant or um, hanging plants outside your balcony or
Mm-hmm.
potted plants in the home is a beautiful way to connect to this energy of the earth and I talk about Mother Earth in the book. It's just slightly different than what we think of as Mother Earth. We think of Mother Earth as like this lovely lady who is bringing forth all this abundance, and there certainly is that appreciation. But she's seen as the actual Earth, is
Mm-hmm.
the is the um, is the is the spirit. So Earth is wherever you are. So even though you're not in that beautiful, rich black earth of Ukraine, it's very, I think, important to connect to the earth and as part of your practice, especially as if you're doing a Slavic practice. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And the cool thing about that is, yes, you can still connect with the earth in even ways of, like you said, having a potted plant if you live in an apartment in the middle of the city, all of those things. It, and now we even have like home hydroponics and stuff like that, which is a little more on the expensive side, obviously, but like you have so many different options to still connect with this and connect with the spirit of that. So that's beautiful. Now obviously Baba Yaga is known for the symbolism of her house. The house that
Hmm.
moves on her chicken legs and it shifts on its own. It has a life of its own, to let's be honest.
Yeah.
And so do you see this kind of as a metaphor for witchcraft and the fact that it should constantly be evolving and adapting?
Um, I think, the house has a really interesting, lots of interesting layers. Because one of the things is that it's chaotic, and in the way that only an experienced witch would feel comfortable in chaos,
Mm-hmm.
or feel not thrown by chaos, right? So, the reason I say chaotic is because this house turns around on its living chicken legs. Sometimes in some stories, it's one chicken leg, sometimes it's two, sometimes it's not chicken legs at all, it's a spindle, but the main point of this house is that it spins around.
Hmm.
And to enter into the house to meet Baba Yaga, you have to know, it's almost like you have to appease the spirit of the house by having the right words, saying the right words,
Yes.
which translates to hut. Basically, most of the stories, it translates to hut, hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me. If you try to enter the house without saying those words, then the house will keep turning its back to you and you won't be able to get in the door. Well, why this is represents this chaos is because what most people don't know is that um, traditional Slavic homes were were created with the directions, and there were certain parts of the home that faced certain directions in everybody's home.
Hmm.
So you would have your eastern corner, you would have the home altar on the eastern corner, for example, and you had the big masonry stove in another corner, and your sleeping area in another corner, and these were standard. You did not divert from this directional system at all, no matter
Hmm.
what you were doing. If your land wasn't going to work for that layout, you just found other land to build on, right? So everybody's home, I mean, you can think of this such an interesting thing, these little huts that were basically like 1 and 2 room homes. This is what the peasants lived in.
Hmm.
It's almost like a little bit like, I think for Americans, it's easy to understand, like little house in the big woods,
Hmm.
where she lived in a pretty much, I think, a 1 room cabin, right?
Yeah.
So this wasn't unknown, or this wasn't unusual, even, up and even now, there are still these hati that are these little huts that have this format, right?
Hmm.
And are heated by wood and a big wood stove and so on. So when Baba Yaga has this house that spins around, it's like, whoa, you're breaking all the rules. I mean, she's a rule breaker. So the fact that she has this house that doesn't conform to the standards, many of the standards, meaning it's up on stilts, it's the legs or the spindle, it spins around, it is anthropomorphic, it has a sentience because it responds to your magic words. This creates this creates this tension for the listener of the story, who would be used to a house that was very, by the books, and here's this house that doesn't. So there's another layer to it too. If we look at the house with the chicken legs, chickens are very, very, very prominent in Slavic magic for divination,
Hmm.
for all kinds of things. So chickens, roosters, they were often used as sacrifices when building a house, for example. So there's all kinds of other layers to this, but the house is definitely this anthropomorphic house. And you asked, is it a symbol for what? I I'm lost track.
You're no, you're totally okay. I asked if do you see this as a metaphor for witchcraft, that it should be constantly
Yeah.
evolving and adapting?
Well, I think it shows a couple of things. It really demonstrates, before you even meet Baba Yaga, what a powerful witch she is.
Hmm.
And her, I think this is more about like a metaphor of like the evolution of how an individual's practice should get to the point where they, if we look at it from the perspective of, I want to be Baba Yaga when I grow up. And we should all aspire to that beautiful, powerful cronehood. If that's your goal, then there's a message there that you need to be okay and centered and at ease in chaos.
I love that. And it's funny because when you think of chaos, at least in my household, when we think of chaos, we think of Loki, because this is a Loki household as well. Loki, I
Yeah.
am a priestess of. So it's funny to think that that kind of chaos could also transcend into Baba Yaga's territory, where, she's full of wisdom and she's a little bit scary, but also she's very empowering. And then you throw in this element of chaos, and it's like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because I think you hear, and I'm sure you've heard it a zillion times. If
Hmm.
you say to people that I'm a devotee of Loki, they're like, "You're crazy. What are you doing?"
Yes.
Right? Like, and honestly, when you invite a powerful spirit and the spirit has a chaotic quality to them, you are going to get surprised constantly. It doesn't mean bad surprises. It just means you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to go, oh, okay, this is where we're going. And
Yes.
if you're, I think that as you get more comfortable with witchcraft, you can navigate the twists and turns of life better and not feel this rigid, I have to have it this way. I think that's the best magic when we open it up to however it's going to come and not saying it needs to come in this manifestation, needs to come in this form, you know?
Yes. And, the fun thing about being an experienced witch and also somebody who works with Loki, but, also understanding, the chaos in general of witchcraft, is that when those moments of chaos hit, and trust me, in the last several weeks, I have had more than I have wanted. I think I have had my entire year's worth of chaos happen in about two
Yeah.
weeks. But the funny thing is, those moments to somebody who's not used to chaos, like for example, our car engine went out the same
Yeah.
day that we had to put our dog down.
Oh,
And I know that sounds incredibly heartbreaking. It was, but it was also, I remember standing by the car waiting for the vet to come to put the dog down, talking with my husband, going, well, shit, what are we going to do for our car now? And I laughed hysterically. Not because I was, I didn't want to cry. Of course I wanted to cry. I was upset.
yeah.
My dog was dying. Like, it was all this funny things, but it was this moment of, this is the most chaotically funny moment. And all I could do was laugh. And then fast forward several hours later, after we've, you know, wonderfully given our dog of 18 years a beautiful funeral, and it's about
Mm.
midnight and all this, and my husband and I are sitting on the couch and we're like, you think we could buy a car on the internet? And then we did. And it was a car that was in wonderful condition. It was way better than we ever expected. I remember sitting there thinking, after we had done that, I'm like, Loki, did you kill my car to get me a better one? Is that
Yeah.
what you did?
Yeah. Exactly. It's this kind of thing where I feel like we can have a curiosity when something as a witch who has worked with magic, you had a curiosity
Mm-hmm.
about, oh, what could this, well, okay, let's see what this brings,
Yeah.
rather than, oh, I'm cursed, this is terrible, blah 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 blah. You get into thinking like, okay, well, let's see where this goes. And I think that's part of working with these chaotic spirits. You have to trust, you have to have a
Yeah.
big you
You
know.
definitely do. And in those moments when you're just like, I joked with one of my coven mates, and I was telling her, I was like, I've had just enough bad luck to be annoying in the last 2 weeks, but it all, like, the universe is like, here, I'm gonna go ahead and throw this at you, but right directly behind it is the fix that's so much better than what was originally there. But it was like, nope, we're moving that out and moving this in. It's like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't expecting that. That's a whole lot. Can I have 5 minutes to breathe before you do that again? No. No.
Well, sometimes the timeline isn't, we might have a timeline, but when we, it may not be the right timeline. So if we're willing to just go with it and figure things out as we go along, then it becomes like jazz improvisation. That's what I think,
Yes.
you
Yes,
know.
literally. I feel like I'm in the middle of like one of those like Fred Astaire swing dance kind of movies, and you never know which way you're gonna turn next. And it's like, oh, well, that was fun.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm
yeah,
still
yeah,
I'm still on my feet. I have not fallen yet, and we're doing
yeah,
good. But it's still been one of those chaotic moments, and it's funny because it's not just me. It's like this year alone has had this beautiful Baba energy of like, I'm gonna teach you all of this really great stuff, and I'm also gonna fuck up your life at the same time,
yeah,
but it's gonna be fine. Everything's gonna work out. And it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. I wanted a little more chill for 2025. And it's like, no,
yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a great story I talk about, I have in my own old podcast, I talk about how to deal with what I call magical disappointment. It's when we're looking at things from our human material perspective. It's like we're looking out a window and a train, like we're sitting in a train and we're looking out a window. And right
Mm-hmm.
now, we'll see, rolling hills with cows on it, right?
Yeah.
What we don't see is the entire trip, and the entire trip could have cities and mountains and ocean and all kinds of things. But we're just looking out that window at that one scene, which is what is right in front of us temporally at this moment in time. We do
Mm-hmm.
not know. So so when you're looking at, oh, my freaking car broke down, it is frustrating and annoying and stressful and all of those things, but you're not seeing the brand new car that comes next. This is in tarot, in the fool's journey in tarot, it's the tower card followed by the star card,
Yes.
right? you know
Yes.
and that's what you have to remember, is that there can be star card moments. Not everything that happens to us has a star card moment, any chaotic thing, but when you're working with these spirits, certainly you can see that happen.
I also think it's very ironically awesome and synchronistic that you said the star card, which was literally the card I pulled this morning.
I love it.
I'm like, okay, well, that's the direction we're going, and I love it. It's awesome. So, kind of bringing it back to the book and everything, I loved all of the different rituals and things that you put in the book. So, are there any specific spells or rituals from the book that you feel are especially powerful and relevant in today's modern practice of Baba Yaga?
Well, one of the things that I mean, maybe it's just because seasonally this is where we're at, but working with eggs,
Mm-hmm.
it's something very accessible. Well, maybe not very expensive, but
Kind of
accessible.
accessible.
You just have to go to Costco and get, their
Or
their eggs.
find your local farmers that sell them cheap.
Yes, yes, that's even better. So, I as work with eggs, eggs are, I mean, they have so much lore and so much magic, and it's really ancient magic.
Mm-hmm.
And so this particular what people don't know, and what has been kind of a little bit lost, not totally lost, but a little bit lost, is they think of these um decorated eggs. Pysanki is the way you say it in
Mm-hmm.
Ukrainian. It's the decorated eggs. They're very intricately decorated with symbols.
Mm-hmm.
And they just think, oh, it's a pretty Easter egg. And this is like Ukrainian design, right? We see Pysanki, by the way, in Poland. We see them in a lot of other Slavic countries, but there's variations, even variations in design from village to village, or region to region in Ukraine. But what is not widely known is that this method of using an egg as a talisman is totally pre-Christian.
Mm-hmm.
There's loads of evidence that this is a practice that's been going on for thousands of years. And the designs go back 7,000 years on some of them. We can't find eggs that are 7,000 years old, because eggs will decompose, they will
Yes.
break, they'll decompose. But we have pottery that's 7,000 years old, that has the same designs that we see on eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't go back and like copy the pottery, like, oh, I'm going to go to the museum and then copy this pottery onto an egg. It was just this continuity from ancient times into the present. We also know that a lot of cultures that were communicating with the Slavic lands also have egg traditions, similar egg traditions. We see it in ancient Greece, we see it in ancient Rome, we see it in ancient Persia. We see these egg traditions. So there's just absolutely beautiful ones. Everything from the decorated eggs to dyed eggs, where you drop the shells into the water so that 40 days later they will notify the blessed ones in the lower world that another year has passed, right? This goes
Mhm.
back to the idea that spring equinox is um, the beginning of the new year, the
Yes.
agricultural new year.
Mhm.
Um, so we just see these really beautiful traditions. So that's one of my favorites. And it's like I just scratch the surface of it in the book. I talk about it. There's definitely a chapter about it, but there's so much more to it, and so much more that is done, and all kinds of magic and spells and divination with eggs, and all kinds of beautiful spiritual rituals, ancient rituals. So yeah.
And the fun thing about the egg traditions as well, like you were saying about the shells and letting the people in the underworld know that another year has passed. And I think the other thing too that we don't really quite remember a lot is that, yes, while spring is all about rebirth and renewal and the start of new beginnings, there's also a connection to the underworld and the dead of spring.
Yeah.
And it's the spring equinox is also kind of the same time that they also say that the veil still thins on the other side, so you might get some more spirit activity in spring, just like you would around, like, say, Samhain or any of those types of the year. So you get this beautiful kind of moment where you get to connect also with life but also with death. And at the end of the season, around Samhain, you get to connect with death as well as life, because you're saying goodbye to it and welcoming in the dead part of the year. And then now we're welcoming in the life part of the year, saying goodbye to death. So it's this really great, beautiful cycle that I think is important to remember. And I also, love how Baba is this beautiful symbol also, where she is the incorporation of life and death as well. She inhabits both,
Yeah.
and she's just stunning about it. And as somebody who doesn't work with Baba, I sure adore her a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
We haven't agreed to a formal relationship, but I do adore her. She is a wonderful deity. So
Well,
obvious. Oh, go
there's
ahead,
a whole
please.
thing. I mean, talking about the spring liminality of spring. So Slavic magic is very much into the idea that there's liminal times and
Mm-hmm.
liminal places, and these are places that you can traverse into other realms, and the spirit realm can come forward, and all of that. So equinoxes would be as much, spring equinox would be just as much a liminal time, because it's not winter and it's not spring, it's in between,
Yes.
right? So going back to pagan times, but now it's, as many things are, it's now part of Easter traditions. But we can look at those Easter traditions and tease out what is pagan. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
easy to do. And know that that was something that was celebrated around the spring equinox. So there's a thing called Provody, and Provody it's called farewells, but it's what it is in conjunction with Easter. Easter would be celebrated, and you'd invite your beloved ancestors and beloved dead. And then a week later, you would have this picnic in the cemetery, where you would bring the decorated eggs, and you bring food and wine, and have a big feast, like a picnic on the ground at the graves. And I call it I call it Ukrainian Dia de los Muertos,
I was
and kind of
literally about to ask that. Okay.
yeah. So, but this takes place in spring, not in the fall equinox time. It takes place at the spring equinox. And so this is the time that you have access to your loved ones, and it's meant to be happy. You're not meant to be sad. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, there's lots of admonitions. Like, if you're sad, then you're not doing it right. It's a joyful connection and chat and hanging out and telling your loved ones how things have been going, letting them know what you're doing, and so on. And it's just this really lovely thing. So this idea that there's so much work with the dead, as well as life of spring is absolutely on point. Absolutely on point.
That is beautiful. I did not know that actually about the Ukrainian version of basically the Day of the Dead. And so seeing the kind of reversed opposite side of it and getting to see that celebration also in spring, not just at the end of the year, is really amazing and beautiful. And I may have to incorporate that in my path now because, obviously I work with Santa Muerte as well. So we do Day of the Dead in our household. And so now I'm going to have to be like, well, I got to have a spring one. I got to have it in balance, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, all of the holidays have and we can see like the remnants of the pagan traditions, which would be any liminal time,
Yeah.
including winter solstice, summer solstice, fall equinox, spring equinox. These are times when the spirits are accessible to us.
Hmm.
And yeah, so it's a beautiful way to bring that in. Yeah.
That's really cool. That's really awesome. So, kind of bringing in the different types of traditions and all of that, obviously the book talks all about the Slavic magical practices, but do you think that some of these practices and Baba Yaga's magic is adaptable in different paths, such as like Hellenic, Norse, occultic witchcraft? I mean, we've already talked a little bit about the, combination of Loki. So do you think that they are still more able to be merged with those kinds of paths?
I think it's even more than emerging, because when you look at folk magic, the more you study folk magic of different lands, you will find commonalities.
Hmm.
There's one that blew my mind because I wasn't aware of it till I started doing the research for the book, because my grandmother didn't do this. But there are egg cleanses that are like limpia. So
Hmm.
in um Mexican culture, South American, Central American culture, there's something called a limpia, which is a cleansing. And oftentimes it's done with an egg and rolling an egg. We see it
Hmm.
in Italian magic, we see it in Mexican magic, and we see it in Slavic magic. So where did this come from? Who came up with it first? We don't know. It goes so far back. Did they all just spontaneously start on their own with no reference to another culture? We don't know. It's so old. So when we see things and we look at folk magic from other cultures, and if you start to really study folk magic, you'll see a lot more that is in common than is different,
Hmm.
particularly if you look at the connection between Slavic magic and Celtic magic. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm reading about this Celtic thing and I'm like, they have that in Slavic magic, like what the heck. Well, then I started digging a little deeper and I realized the Celts didn't just spring up in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. They traveled from Central Europe, east and west.
Hmm.
So the area that my grandparents are from was called Galicia, and not Spain, Galicia. There's a part of Spain that's Galicia. This was Galicia, was a kingdom in what would be like the border of Poland and Ukraine. And it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Well, Galicia, if you listen to that name,
Hmm.
it contains Gaul, Galicia, Gaul. It's related to, it is Celtic. It is
Hmm.
Gaulish. So the practices in Eastern Europe and the practices in Celtic lands are often completely like kissing cousins, worshiping in oak groves, not writing down keeping everything oral tradition. These are all things that we see. I mean, it goes on and on and on with the different practices and stories and things. So we have the Keliach, in who's kind of the, I would say, the Baba Yaga of Scotland and Ireland.
Hmm.
And we have Baba Yaga. So you have these interesting correspondences. So when you look at folk magic, you're not going to see a lot of correspondences with ceremonial magic or high magic. But when you look at folk magic, you'll find hey, wait a minute, they do that over there too, and we
Yes.
do that over here. So it is fascinating. It is fascinating. So it's not that they are even merging; it's that they probably came from the same source.
I would say that's probably true because I mean, if you think about, all of the conquesting tribes from like Norse or the Greeks or the Romans or any of the ones even
Yeah,
prior to that, you some of those people stayed behind. Some of the traditions stayed behind. I mean, we even have there's some minor things that we see in Norse mythology that was picked up from when they came over to the Americas and interacted with the natives here and brought it back, and vice versa. We see a lot of these different magics or folk magics or traditions that have been spread across the globe, probably because people traveled. I mean, we think about travel now and it's easy. We hop on a plane and we go wherever we're going to go. But, back then it was a big deal to manage one of these trips. And so of course they would be gone for a long time. They'd be interacting with the different cultures and different places. And yes, there was war and, all the icky stuff, but still they brought back traditions and they brought back stories and they brought back lore. And, kind of like, I was saying even today of like, oh, hey, I should incorporate that into my practice. They probably did the same thing that said, you know what? That sounds like a good idea. I'm going to take that home and I'm going to do that too because that sounds awesome. I mean,
we absolutely know this to be true because we see archaeological evidence.
hmm
So we'll see things like we'll see things like the goddess of Willendorf, for example. One of the things that is we have archaeological evidence that this is true because we see things like, for example, the goddess of Willendorf. The goddess of Willendorf was found in Germany,
hmm
but the stone that the goddesses of Willendorf is made out of, they've traced back to Italy.
hmm
Some thought that she came from Ukraine. There's a possibility that she did, but there's stronger evidence that she came from a certain area in Italy where the stone was made. So we see things like coral beads way far away from the Adriatic Sea where they're found, red coral. We
hmm
see amber being traded from the Baltic lands all over, you know. And then, of course, we have the incense road, the Silk Road, and everything that came later. But it is we think of how um, challenging travel was in those days, but it did not stop people. They didn't know any better. They didn't know that the airplanes were coming. So if they had to travel months and months and months or sail or hike over mountains or do any of that stuff, it was part of their reality. And
hmm
so traders not only collected artifacts but traditions and stories and all of these other things that would then go with them when they made the trades.
Yes, absolutely. And that's kind of how we end up with these beautiful cross cultures from around the world, is because they thought that it was important enough to bring back home or to leave a piece of them behind, somewhere between trade and alliance and all of these different things. It was a moment of, say, I will give you this and you get exchange this. It is a moment of meeting in the liminal spaces of sorts, of communication between different peoples and understanding that. And we get to see all of these different things. And now, yes, I know that there are folks out there that are going to be like, but yes, some of those were stolen. Yes, you're correct in those moments, but also there were moments of trade and there were moments
Yeah.
of, communion between peoples,
This
even
yeah,
with
this was
language
not
barriers.
colonization, but
Yeah.
we have to differentiate between colonization, which happened, and things get transferred in that way. But this was not that. So
No.
to say like, well, Greek, Greek people dyed eggs red in the spring, and Slavic people dyed eggs red in the spring. We don't know where it started, or Persian people dyed eggs red in the spring. We don't know who started it, but we do know that there was trade and trade of information as well as trade of artifacts and useful
Yes.
things, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And maybe they died things red because red was the first thing that popped up in the ground. Maybe those were the colors of the flowers or the berries that were first there, and those were the first access to the dyes that they had. It could be a very simple answer like that, or it
Yeah.
could be that, the head said, "Hey, I do this." And then they're like, "Hey, that's a really good idea." And then they adapted it. So we don't really know, but it's still so amazing to think about. And it's fun to also think about where we have come as a people since then. And we are still adapting into those cultures, and we are still remembering them and honoring them just as we would our own spirits and ancestors. So, how do spirits and ancestors really work in Slavic witchcraft, and how do they kind of intersect with the lessons from Baba Yaga within the book?
Well, ancestor worship is a huge part of Slavic magic. And what Baba Yaga represents is she is a gateway between the world of the living and the world of spirit. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's you know symbol after symbol after symbol in the stories that tell us this. So when you hear a story, for example, like where she's going to, you know, she's like, I say like there's the Hansel and Gretel witch that is going to throw the kids in the oven, right? And she
Mm-hmm.
gets outsmarted. We see this pop up also in some of the Baba Yaga stories where she threatens the kid. Sometimes it's an adult, but most often it's a young person. I'm going to put you in the oven. What what a listener, a 21st century listener, does not understand is that the oven was the home of the ancestors. The fire in the oven was the home of the ancestors. So there were a lot of rules about the fire. Like you never put your fire out except for once at winter solstice. And then you restarted your fire from scratch by friction.
Yes.
So it was hard work to get a fire. It wasn't easy, but this was living fire and you wanted living fire. So the fire would be going all year long, spring, summer, winter, fall, right?
Yes.
And the fire represented the home of the ancestors. It was the ancestors. So rather than like what we in Western culture think of like, well, you're gonna go to hell and it's fiery pit and stuff like that. Fire was seen as like, oh, it's warm in these bitter cold winters. It's a lovely thing. It represents this idea of the paradise. And then the fire itself was treated like an ancestor. So there are old sayings like don't swear in front, like don't say bad words in front of the wood stove. Why? Because it's the ancestors. Like you wouldn't swear in front of your grandma, right? Hopefully, unless
Hopefully
you have a
not.
wild grandma. Maybe you have a wild grandma, I don't know. But most like we look at that deference to the elders shows up in the reverence that is paid to the fire. So when Baba Yaga is like saying to the kids, I'm going to put you in the fire, it's like you need to go back to your ancestors. You need to learn a lesson, or you aren't quite, you're still green. You need to be like brought into this initiation to get to be a wise adult and not just a green kid,
Mm-hmm.
So there's she's that gateway between that world of the living and the world of the dead and going into her house. Okay, even this again, many, many, many symbols around her house, around her hut is a fence made of bones with human skulls on top of the bones, and often it's like one skull is missing and the protagonist is like, oh, is she looking for another skull? She gonna use my skull, right?
Mm-hmm.
So uh, there's this idea of this, you even before you get in to meet her, you're entering into this charnel house. Basically, charnel house is, if you've ever seen the ancient practice, people would be buried and then they'd be exhumed. Their bones would be exhumed after several years and then piled up in these monasteries or um, different, I would call them like housing for bones, housing for the dead.
Almost like a
This was the practice.
mausoleum. of
Yeah,
sorts.
but there
Yeah.
but there's if you look at a charnel house, it's like stacks of bones and stacks of skulls. And you see these, and this practice existed in medieval times, but most definitely existed before then. We have evidence of exhumation and then putting the bones on the home altar in ancient times.
Mhm.
So this idea that you're entering into this space where there's these human bones, you're entering into this liminal space between the world of the living and the world of the dead, and she's the gatekeeper.
Mhm.
She's the gatekeeper. So we also see it in her being in other stories. She's the queen of the lower world or the underworld. Not that it like literally is underground. So she's associated with snakes, which come out of the ground, right? They're
Mhm.
seen as these beings that can traverse between the world of the dead and the world of the living as well. So sometimes she turns into a snake, sometimes she turns into a flying snake, which is a dragon, you know? So
Mhm.
we see this idea of her being easily able to traverse between the world of spirit and the world of living. And when you go to meet her, you have access to that too. So, yeah.
That's incredible. And the beauty of that too is the you were talking about the child coming to meet the ancestors, or you're going to be thrown into the oven or into the fire, and it reminded me of when I would be a rambunctious child and my mother would send me to my grandmother, and she would be like, just go to your grandmother. My grandmother would be like, okay, come on, we'll go do something. We'll bake some cookies or something. And she would tell me all these stories of her childhood and all this. And of course, as a child, baking cookies, because naturally sugar, you're attracted to that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're also enthralled by the story that she's telling you of this different time and the wisdom that she acquired through it, and the hardship she endured and all this. And so you get to hear about the wisdom of that, and that's kind of what that reminded me of. And I was like, wow, okay, she's truly the grandmother, because that's what my
Yeah.
grandmother used to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she usually in the stories will make you test you.
Yes.
It's an initiation. If you look at it through the lens of if it's an initiation, then it totally makes sense.
Yes.
Totally makes sense, right? If an initiation is supposed to test you, not only so you understand, you can show her that you're worthy of whatever she's going to give you, but it's also for you to see how much you know and how much skill you have and how clever you are and all of those things as well.
I think that that's wonderful. And, speaking of tests, we often know Baba Yaga is this gatekeeper of wisdom and transformation and teaching. So, have you personally ever had any experiences where you felt guided or tested by her energy?
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. Like this is I mean, I say she's like an Olympics coach. I don't know if I said this in
You
our
did say this, yes.
yeah. So when I wrote this book, there were many tears of frustration and dead ends and all kinds of things that happened. I mean, writing a book is often tears, but this one was a lot of tears. And um and I think of that pushing through that happens when you push through, that's when the reward comes. So in many of the stories, there's often, you know, there's a good daughter and a bad stepsister, right? And so the stepmother sends her stepdaughter, who's the good girl, to go meet Baba Yaga, and then the good girl gets rewarded because she works hard and figures things out.
Hmm.
And so then she's rewarded with all these riches. So then the stepmother will send her daughter, her biological daughter, but the biological daughter is lazy, doesn't want to work, sassy, arrogant, and she ends up usually something horrible. She dies or she gets killed by
Hmm.
Baba Yaga or something. But the point of that is like if you look at that as a story, yeah, it's a teaching story for kids. Like you should do you should do your chores, right? But it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. It's something we can apply to our lives. If we give up, there's no success.
Right.
There really is no success. And if you push through the difficult things and you discover things about yourself, right? Whether it's physical activity, I ran a marathon and I didn't think I could run a marathon and I did it, or it's writing a book, or it's asking that cute person out, or it's, doing anything that is hard
Yes.
is is rewarded, right? It's rewarded.
Yes. She is the queen of making you realize what you think is weakness is actually strength, and helping you work through and see the kind of diamond in the rough kind of moments. And, especially for a lot of people that I have witnessed with her, is she is kind of this queen of working through, helping you work through the darkest parts of your trauma. And so you get to go through this very painful and very uncomfortable journey with her. But by the time you come out of it, even after all the tears and the I didn't want to do this and dragging your feet, and she taking her cane and knocking it against your shin so you're paying attention kind of things, she also helps you see the wisdom behind it. And when you come out of it, you are like, wow, I
Yeah.
am changed. I am good. Like, I'm better. Like, how did this happen? And I'm not saying that Baba Yaga is a replacement for traditional therapy. In
No. Yeah.
tandem, yes, but she can work alongside your therapist. But she is this beautiful being who allows you to see through the moments when you're like, I can't, I've got nothing left to do. I've got nothing left to give to you. I don't have anything to do with this. She's like, no, you have more, and I'm going to help you see it.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
so good about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, kind of for those who are like, wow, Baba sounds amazing. How do I even begin to work with her? So, those who are seeking to try to work with Baba, where would they begin to their journey to kind of find her to start that discussion of working together?
Well, I did when I wrote my book, I didn't really realize until after the book was done that the book is an initiation. The book itself is an initiation. Not that I'm plugging like go buy my book, but it's
Hey,
like
I mean, that's why
I,
you're here. Go buy her book, everybody.
but the thing is that when you you have to when you're working with any spirit, you cannot just walk up to a spirit and say, "Hey, you need to help me with this thing."
No,
If it's
never
an
do that.
ancestor, that's even questionable too. Like I say, like, do you go like only visit your grandma when you need to borrow $100? That's like a shitty. Sorry, I'm not supposed to swear. That's a crappy that's a crappy uh grandchild that only visits grandma or grandpa when you want some money. So if your only interaction with your ancestors, who are very loving and you already are connected to, is just asking for things, then you need to step up your game. Okay.
Yeah.
That's with your ancestors who are already connected to you. If you're working with a spirit who you have no connection to, you've got to build that relationship just like you would build a friendship. Like,
Hmm.
I wouldn't, I wouldn't say to pagan, hey, give me $100. I mean, you'd be like, what? We just did an interview. Like, that's weird, right? It would be weird. Or walking up to a stranger on the street, even more so.
Yeah.
So you just don't go to a spirit and go, hey, you need to do this thing for me. The spirits are not there as our servants. They are
No.
there to assist us and to help us and to watch over us and protect us and all kinds of things and enlighten us. But you need to build a relationship with them first. So, not just Baba Yaga, any spirit that you're working with, start by learning about them, discovering what um, gifts would be considered in alignment with them, um, and then start offering those gifts. So Baba Yaga is really easy, not easy, but easy, in that we have lots of references. She often will say to the person in the story, you need to spin this wool or spin this fiber for me. You need to weave this thing for me. You need to cook for me. You need to do this. And so, oh, wait a minute. Then you can do those things. So, but it cannot be something that is familiar to you. It has to be showing effort, right? Which most
Yes.
don't know how to spin, and most of us don't know how to weave. Um, So it's like doing the hard, like baking bread is not an easy thing to do. And so
Hmm.
bake bread, right? That is a very traditional thing that you can do that is a little tricky, right? These very elaborate breads that you can make, right? Make that bread for Baba Yaga, make that for your spirits. That's like a huge thing. Um, learn how to spin fibers and spin a ball of yarn, or learn how to weave and weave a belt or weave something, magical and useful. And then you will show her and do it in her, like, you're not doing it just for you, you're actually doing it as an offering to her. The work itself can be an offering, the product that you come out with can be an offering, all of it can be an offering. So if you are like, well, I don't know where to begin, well, there are at least a dozen, if not many, many more activities in my book that are aligned with her. And you just pick them up and start doing them, especially if you're intimidated, especially if it's like, I've never done cross stitch before. Well, great. Now's the time to show your devotion by learning and doing it. Right.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. And it's funny when you were saying all of this, you need to build this relationship with her. You need to have that rapport before you start asking for things. When I first started working with Santa Muerte, that was the thing that everyone told me. You have to build a relationship before you really start
100%.
asking.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is when she and I first started communicating with each other, um we were doing a lot of work with Baba Yaga as, part of kind of adjunct parts of our coven and all that. And I was channeling with Baba and all this. And I told Santa Muerte, I was like, wow, that what you just said there, Baba said that too. And she goes, I like the old grandmother.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
talk a lot. And I'm like, I don't even want to know what y'all discuss, but that's really cool. But it was this really interesting moment that it's like, are y'all just teaming up to like do something here and you're not telling us about it?
Well, I see that. That makes sense to me. Like, I can see that when you said that, I'm like, I picture them sitting around a table drinking a cup of tea and,
Yes, that's exactly what they said. That's exactly what both of them said. Baba was like, yes, sometimes we have tea, sometimes we have something stronger depending on the day. And I'm like, okay,
yeah.
alrighty then. So it's it was just this really awesome moment because of course you fact check with your deities because you always should, just to make sure that you're communicating with who you're communicating with, because
Yes.
sometimes spirits like to sneak their way in and say, oh yeah, I'm Baba Yaga, and it's like, no, you're not. That's
Yeah.
funny, and may all of the universe help you for trying to say that you're Baba, because she's gonna mess you up for that one. But anywho, um but having those moments when you're fact checking your deities, I was like, hey, Santa Muerte said this about you, and she goes, oh yeah, we have tea, and
Yeah.
sometimes things stronger, and I'm like, what are y'all planning? What are you doing? Why are you suddenly both communicating with all of us? What's going on here? And we still have not figured it out, which, that's the divine cosmos of mysteries that are happening there. But I'll tell you one thing, the lessons that are coming out of both of them are so profound and so beautiful and just so gushingly amazing. I
Oh,
can't even put them in words of how amazing they are. And truth be told, if you are somebody who is looking to work with Baba Yaga, be prepared. It's going to be tough. But the lessons and the rewards that will come out of that, like I said, I don't even work with her personally. I have just been a channeler for other people for her. And the things that she has taught me just in those moments have been so amazing that words cannot even begin to describe it. The feelings that come out of that, the reverence and the devotion and the just life affirming moments that, like I said, I can't even put it into words.
yeah.
And if you can give those moments to Baba where you build that relationship with her, if you are somebody that's like, yeah, I really want to work with Baba, you will be so amazed by what she will teach you and the things that will happen in your life because of her that will be profound.
Yeah.
And it will be so awesome.
Yeah. I
Sorry
mean,
for
there's
proselytizing for those 2 point
no,
seconds, but it was just like, oh, divine inspiration right there.
yeah. Well, it's absolutely correct because we even see this reflected in the stories, in
Hmm.
the folk tales. Because if you do the work, you get the magical items, whatever those magical items are, like in
Yes.
different stories, different things, right? Well, that is saying if you do the work, it's not just like you end up with the satisfaction of doing the work, you end up with gifts. Like this book, I did the work and it was hard work and it was definitely a devotion to her, 100% a devotion to her.
Hmm.
And I have been rewarded again and again and again and again and again from this book. I
Yes.
mean, the one that always blows my mind is the divine timing of this book, that it came out right when Ukraine was in the news because of the full scale invasion. Now, I don't glorify that invasion. It's horrible. And I'm, working all the time to provide aid and help and
Yes.
humanitarian aid and all of these things. But the fact that people were interested in Ukraine because it was suddenly in the news was like, you I didn't plan that. You start a book 2 years before it comes out.
Yes.
So that was all her. That was all her. That's why she said you got to do this now.
You have to do it now because people are going to need it. When this
2 years from
happens,
now. Yeah.
it's that's when they're going to need it and they're going to need my wisdom. So you got to get
Yeah.
on it. And truthfully, that's literally how the divine works. Like, I'm in the middle of a book right now doing the exact same thing. And they're like, you got to
Right.
do it right now. And I'm like, but I had other projects. No, right now. Okay, I'm on it. I'm on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? So I think of these, I mean, I think of anybody that starts to say like, or says, I want to be a devotee, I'm like, that's great. But this is not a casual relationship.
No.
This is like, that's why I think she's really like who she connects with. I mean, there's young people that connect to her for sure. But I think where it really becomes very rich is when you start moving into your crone era, because you have experience under your belt.
Yes.
You kind of you have to be ready to be a devotee and work at it. And
Yes.
hopefully you're by the time you are in, post menopausal, you're like, okay, I'm ready to do the work. It's not a skip in the park.
She is not a deity that is, she's not one of the ones that are for the faint of heart. And I don't think any deity is truly for the faint of heart. I think some are more gentle than others.
Yeah.
But she is one of those ones that if you are willing to do the work with her, it's going to be tough. And she does demand you show up and do it. That even if it's not daily, which, I'm a fan of daily, but some people don't have that in their schedule. But weekly or whatever time commitment you set up with her, you have to show. You have to do
Yeah.
it. And she's not one of those ones that will let you really skip out. She will start reminding you and tapping that cane on wherever you are, and you're going to feel the vibrations seep through the world to wherever you are to know it's like, hey, you're late.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
she will let it be known. So, kind of bringing it to those who are wanting to do that. Outside of your book, what books, resources, practices, stories, whatever, what would you recommend people start with?
Well, it depends on there's plenty of children's storybooks that have Baba Yaga's stories in them. So you can start there. Um, also have to remember, that some people think she's a Russian deity. She's not exclusively Russian. So we had a situation which was a lovely situation in the 1800s, where Alexander Afanasyev,
Mm-hmm.
he um he started writing down the stories because he saw the Russian version of her stories, because he saw the success that the Brothers Grimm were having, writing down, collecting folk tales and writing them down and publishing them. So he was like, oh, well, I'm going to do that too. And I'm going to collect these stories. So he collected many stories, all kinds of stories in Russia. But she is not exclusively Russian. We see her also show up in Polish stories and Ukrainian stories and so on and so forth, and variations on her showing up in Serbia and all kinds of places, right?
Hmm.
So I think starting with the stories that you read, which can be just even like, little kids' picture books are fine. That's a great place to just get familiar with her. If you're of a more scholarly bent and you want something that's more um, dense reading, there's a book by Andreas Johns called it's Baba Yaga. It's called Baba Yaga. I think it's like the ambiguous witch of Slavic folklore. I don't know, something like that. But it's Andreas Johns is the author. This is a scholarly breakdown of her tales and talking about um, where like the different stories that she shows up in. So because the stories are where we meet with her, whether you want to take it in a very light way and read kids picture books, or you want to read a more scholarly book, that's a great place to start because you'll get to know her. You'll get to know her. And that's the first thing. Then you'll start going, oh, well, I can do this. I see this in the story. I could do this as an offering, you
Hmm.
know? So, yeah, that would be a good start.
That is a great start to do that. And, like I had said in the first episode, that, Baba Yaga was the inspiration behind a hex that I did right at the start of the Ukrainian war. And because I didn't work with her even back then, but I knew that she was someone who would demand work before any sort of petitions. I remember I had made it this beautiful, um, like goulash, like it was a beef goulash, that but it was a Hungarian one, and I had found the recipe online, and it was beautiful, and it was amazingly wonderful. And I had
Yeah.
baked this gorgeous loaf of bread, and I put them out on the, this altar that I had made up for her, and I said, I don't work with you, but I would like your help in this. And then the divine words flowed out, and we did the working, and she was a part of it, and she was very receptive to it. So uh doing the work beforehand, doing that understanding and knowing that you're coming from a point of reverence and all of that is so much more impactful than saying, hey, you're a god, you should do this for me. And it's like,
Mm-hmm,
please don't
mm-hmm.
do that. Don't do that with
Yeah.
any deity ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I also think, look at what there's something about subtext in what you did. You weren't asking her to bless you.
No.
You were asking her to help innocents protect themselves.
Hmm.
And so when you go up to a deity and you're like, hey, I'm going to add this energy to sort of put my petition that you help your children, and help in this situation is a much different thing than, hey, I want you to do this for me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's she's got skin in the game in that before you even do that. So being not a devotee and just making her, not just, but making laboring over this delicious food that you made by hand is totally appropriate to the thing that you're asking for.
Yes.
If you want something, hey, personal, this is for me, I need you to do this for me, that is a different thing that you need to have already built a relationship
Yes.
that's reciprocal with that spirit. It's a different thing, right? So, yeah. Yeah.
She is an incredible being, and I am honored to, I suppose, call her friend at this point, because like I said, we don't work together, but we are familiar enough that she and I can be comfortable in each other's company, while I do the work for her that she asks of me, obviously being the channeler for those who need her. in those moments, and allowing me to, I call it being her voice box, because that's basically what I become in those moments. But it's such a wonderful experience, and she's such a gentle guide in those moments. And all of the times I've ever seen her do work through somebody else who does work with her, she's incredible. So first of all, thank you for writing the beautiful book that you did write, and I hope that you will continue her stories and her legends and her practices, and honoring her in those words that you do write, if anything else does come out of that. um so that being said, it kind of, we talked a little bit about it in the first episode, but just in case anything has changed, what are you working on that people can be aware of for the future?
Right now I just came out with a book called The Witch's Guide to Animal Familiars, which really is um interestingly it has a relation to Baba Yaga, because if you know her stories, she's the protector of the wild animals in the
Mm-hmm.
forest.
Yes.
So I talk in this book, I talk about working with animals in cooperative ways. So your familiar is your magical partner. It is a cooperative partnership with an animal that could be a pet or it could be a wild animal.
Mm-hmm.
And um, it is one that you both enter into that willingly. I talk about, of course, other relationships, not non magical relationships as well, but this is this special one where you're making magic with an animal and how to make magic with those animals. So I have everything from insects and reptiles to cats, dogs, horses, farm animals, um, and reptiles, amphibians, I mean rabbits, I mean you name it, there's every animal's birds, bugs, everything is covered in their fish. So no matter where you meet that animal kingdom, if you are, you know this is another path of witchcraft that is, I think, influenced by my work with Baba Yaga for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that one just came out. I'm working on a book right now, writing and just finished up writing the first draft of a book called The Witch's Guide to Plant Familiars, and
Oh,
how you
okay.
can, with the plant kingdom, trees, gardens, house plants, but not in the way that most books talk about herbs and plants and witchcraft. That's a little bit of that in there, but it's much more about building relationship with these living things and meeting them in the world, between you, sentient human, and them, sentient plant, and how the two of you can work together and how you can enter into their world. I mean, it's really pretty magical. Now you know, I was saying earlier before we started recording, it was like 5 books in one. There's so much information
That
out
is a
there.
lot to take in. And who's the publisher for those?
Oh, Hay House. So Hay House is published The Witch's Guide to Animal Familiars. The Witch's Guide to Plant Familiars will be coming out in 2026. And in between, in early 2026, I'm having a deck come out, which is it's an oracle deck. It's the Familiar Pocket Oracle, which blends plants and animals.
Oh, that's
So
lovely.
yeah. So it's the only deck I know of that I'm aware of that you can use not only, well, in the images, I chose plants and animals that were natural friends, meaning
Mm-hmm.
the plant is something that is either consumed by the animal or used by the animal in some way. It's not, those animals and plant relationships are friendly relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but then the deck itself can not only be used as a traditional oracle deck for yourself, but also to get insight into what your plant or your animal is communicating to you. So if you want to be a pet psychic or a plant psychic, this is a tool for that.
That's so cool. I'm gonna have to definitely look into that. That is awesome. Well, um, everyone, the website and all of that is going to be listed in the show description. All of the book links will be listed in the show description. Everything is going to be there. Madame Pamita, thank you so much for this. We are going to have you back on the show. Absolutely, because we're going to have to talk about all of this. And we're going to talk more about that after we're done recording. But for everyone who is listening, thank you so much for listening to the show. Thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for keeping the show going and alive and supporting it and sharing it with your friends. You are the heart of why I keep doing this show, and thank you for that. And Madame Pamita, thank you so much for being here today. It was incredible, and I can't wait for any other conversations we have in the future.
I love it. Me too.
So, everyone, take care of yourselves, be kind to each other, be kind to yourselves, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye, everyone. Hello, friends. So, as you know, I do a lot of community work as well, in addition to the show. So if you're looking to deepen your practice with and connect with like-minded witches like myself, or even get your questions answered, you should join the Discord. And the Discord has this beautiful community that I have built, and it offers some really great opportunities for witches to connect. Once a month we host temple hours. I know, silly name, but it's true. We host a open discussion where you can ask your witchcraft, paganism, or even spiritual questions. And if you're curious about deity work, spellcraft, or if you just want to chat with other fellow practitioners like myself, because I usually will be there, Temple Hours is a space where you can come and learn and grow. The other one that we offer is the Divine Gathering. So every week we host a public devotional circle to honor our gods, share offerings, and strengthen our spiritual connections with the divine. So, no matter who you work with, no matter where you are in your practice, this is a time for reverence and community support. So, you should totally come join us in the Raven's Nook. It's a great place, it's a warm community, it is very welcoming, very chill and relaxed. And if you want to join us, which I hope that you will, there's a link in the show description, and I can't wait to see you there. So take care, everyone, and I'll see you all next time.